Hello, this is Pastor Darrel Deuel again, director of the Sending Place, and we're here walking through the letter of joy in the Bible, the letter of Paul to the Philippians. This is a tough time in our country with all the fear that's going on, all the uncertainty that's going on, or the coronavirus and our reaction to it, our life change because of it, as we're not free to do the things that we've been normally used to doing, not free to gather, not free to do a lot of things. And so it's a tough time for many people, and for many it can be a tough time to find joy. And that's why I want to walk through the letter to the Philippians, because Paul, sitting in prison, perhaps soon to be executed for his faith in Christ, is filled with joy. That means we can be too. So we pick up today with chapter 1, verse 15. Paul says, "Some indeed preach Christ from envy and rivalry, but others from goodwill. The latter do it out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former proclaim Christ out of rivalry, not sincerely, but thinking to afflict me in my imprisonment. What then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice." Notice how Paul finds the most amazing things to rejoice in. Here there's people proclaiming Jesus even while he's in prison. Some are doing it for the right reasons, some are not. That's still true today. Some preach Christ for the right reasons, some do not. And yet, Paul could spend a lot of time berating those who have the wrong intentions, wrong theology, wrong way of doing things. But Paul doesn't do that. Paul looks at the big picture and he just rejoices that no matter what is the intention of people preaching, he just rejoices that Christ is being named, Christ is being glorified, Christ is being preached, Christ is being told. Wow, that's looking at the big picture indeed. You see, back in that day, there was a lot of people who had not heard the word of Jesus before. That's not very common in our country. I have been places around the world where people had never heard the word of Jesus before, and it was pretty amazing, because that's not the experience we have every day here in America. And yet Paul was kind of in that situation apparently, as he just rejoiced when Christ was proclaimed. I guess we can learn from that too. Then he goes on to something that is extremely important for us these days. Take a look at the next verse. "Yes, and I will rejoice," Paul says in verse 18, "for I know that through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this will turn out for my deliverance, as it is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be at all ashamed, but that with full courage, now as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether in life or by death. For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me. Yet which I shall choose, I cannot tell. I am hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better. But to remain in the flesh is more necessary on your account. Convinced of this, I know that I will remain and continue with you all for your progress and joy in the faith, so that in me you may have ample cause to glory in Christ Jesus because of my coming to you again." Again, this attitude of Paul ought to be one that all of us Christians strive to have if we don't already have it already. Notice that Paul had absolutely no fear of dying, which means he pretty much had no fear. He had been through much. He'd been beaten, he'd been shipwrecked, he'd been put down, he'd been laughed at, and he'd been in prison a number of times. And he had no fear. He had no fear because he did not fear death. Notice as he's sitting in prison, he's kind of pondering what he would rather have happen to him in the future if he had a choice. Would he want to continue to live, get out of prison, go back to doing ministry? Or would he rather die and go be with Christ? That great line he says is, "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." Notice as he's looking at himself and what he would rather have, he says, life is good in Christ. Life is better in death, because then I get to go be with Christ. Life is good. Dying is better, is Paul's attitude as he lives his life in Christ. Now, if you have that attitude, you will not be afraid to die. You will not be afraid to live. See, what's people's concern nowadays in terms of this evil virus that's out there? What's the worst thing that could happen to us? Well, gee, the worst thing that could happen is it could kill us. That's not what Paul says. Paul says if something kills us, it's not the worst thing, it's the best thing. Because then you go get to be with Jesus. Wow. That's the attitude of the Christian, of the believer, one who trusts in Christ. Remember, what Christ has done in him, truth is stronger than falsehood. Life is stronger than death. Forgiveness is stronger than sin. And in him, life is good. So whatever your situation is at this particular moment in time, good times or what you could describe as bad times, whatever it is, in Christ, life is good. And if we die in Christ, life is even better. So take this seriously. Strive to have that attitude where living is good in Christ. Dying is better in Christ. May you have that kind of peace and that kind of joy which gets you through every day. Take care.